Welcome to the CTO Compass podcast. I'm your host, Mark Wormgoor, tech strategist and executive coach. In every episode, we meet tech leaders, from startup CTOs to enterprise CIOs, to explore what it means to lead in tech today. They share their stories and their lessons so that you can navigate your own journey in tech. Let's dive into today's episode. Consulting and systems integration. Honestly, I've been in the world for 10 years with Accenture, and then on the client side, 5 years. A very interesting world where so many things go wrong, and when they go wrong, they're very, very expensive. Abhijit, who's with us today, has been on the consulting side for a decade, and after he started Avira Advisors, and he's now sitting on the buyer's side with the clients and making sure that the projects go right from their side, which is very interesting. He's also writing a book called Start at Zero, and we're going to get into that as well and see what that's all about. But before we get there, AV, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. I've been excited about this conversations. Thanks for having me.
And before we get into it, I gave a bit of background on you, but what is it that we need to know about you for how you ended up here?
I've been in consulting for 20 plus years. Got into it in the mid 2000s, right out of grad school, like most of us do. And my background is finance and accounting. But I was always that kid that opened up radios to see what was inside, and I could put it back together. So consulting kind of helps me and allows me to do that with my finance background because we do ERP work across the country. So that, in a nutshell, is who I am. I like to tinker.
And I've read some of your views in the consulting world, but what's your view on consulting and why did you leave?
Well, I didn't leave. I still run a consulting firm, except it's on the buyer side, right? We're helping our clients figure out how to modernize their technologies and how they fit into the new world of AI. And up to this point, all of our clients have been local governments in the US. So that's a challenging market sector in itself. So my thoughts on consulting, it's a necessary profession. It's often maligned because of how abusive it can get. And that's what my book's about, how to not be abused by consultants.
So, and how does it get abusive? Why? Why does it happen?
A lot of times it's because the incentives are not aligned, right? You have a big four company saying, we'll help you modernize your operations, but you have to use whichever product they're selling that day. And now the client is left with no choice. So we come in and say, okay, we can do this without being biased towards a certain product stack or SaaS product that you'll be tied into for the next 20 years. So it gets abusive when the client doesn't have the knowledge of the market. They're more interested in running their business as they should be. And they don't have anybody but the salespeople on the vendor side telling them how it should go.
And you work in these government, semi-government, I know even the schooling systems environments. Aren't they, at least here in the Netherlands, they're required to do like a formal RFP process before they can select or buy anything over a specific size? Does that not happen?
It does. It happens, but it's like buying a house or building a house, right? You go to the contractor and say, how much for a house? They'll tell you based on what car you showed up in and what watch you're wearing. When you don't engage an architect that tells you in an unbiased manner what house you need, where it should be facing, what kind of windows you need, that's sort of the space we occupy in the market.
So give me some examples of where this whole process has gone horribly wrong.
Gosh, man, and this is something where I get accused of only speaking about bad news because there's so many failure examples, right? This Cook County, Illinois, they set out on this journey for $75 million. Now they're at 200 plus million, no end in sight. In UK, there was the Birmingham City Council, which I talk about extensively in my book. 200 plus million pounds spent on an Oracle implementation. By the way, not Oracle's fault. This is all a result of not having these incentives aligned and not doing the prep work to get ready for a massive implementation like that. Those are just two that come to mind. But again, there's so many success stories too across, and you've been part of them too, right? There's a methodology of doing this. You don't just buy a product and rip and replace. This is not changing from Hotmail to Gmail. your whole enterprise and its life depends on this the software.
And indeed, I've seen the success stories, but the Birmingham case really interests me. I've read about it before, but in a nutshell, how did they get from, I think the original budget was like 19 or 20 million pounds to 200 plus? That's not like it didn't double or
Yeah.
triple. I mean, that's tenfold. How does that happen?
It happens slowly, Mark. It doesn't happen overnight. And clients bring us in when they've picked a vendor, a system implementer, and a product, and they don't have internal PMO. They're relying on the vendor's PMO to make the right calls. Again, misalignment of incentives. 2, change orders are baked into the contract, right? Without any sort of teeth. This one deal a client we're working with, pretty large airport in the US, they're 16 months into an implementation that was supposed to take 17 months. In month 16, the SI comes back and says, we need $5 million more to finish this project. And when our client, the sponsors, the CFO, that person says, okay, tell me why you need 5 million and why 3 months. The answer was, well, we have an option in our contract to extend this by 3 months. And we have 43 people billing on your project. That's why. And so there isn't a justifiable framework of why this project is delayed. There's a risk register, but it's so fluffy, right? Everything's yellow. Most things are green. But here you are, 16 months in, asking for $5 million more with no end in sight. So if you let that go on, that ends up being 216 billion pounds.
Incredible. It's incredible, 5 million.
Uh-huh.
So how do you solve it then? I mean, you talk about these projects where basically, I think if you come in and the vendor has the customer has already decided on the vendor and the SI partner, it's hard to negotiate. But where do you start?
So the same example, right? We're being brought in at this point where they're starting to go down this change order path with no end in sight. My first instinct is to look at what is. Let me look at the RAID logs. Let me look at the project status reports. Look at the contract. Where were we supposed to be? And see where the blame really is. Sometimes it's the client, right? They get on these paths and thinking that they've done this before 20 years ago, and it's the same world today. Somebody that used to be an SAP expert now becomes the project management office program manager because they've been in the system before. And these are very specific skill sets. Project management, system implementations are very exact mathematical projects with a large dose of change management included. And when we go into projects to rescue projects like this, that's where we first dig into what's been done for change management. Do the people even know what's going on? And when the RAID logs are all yellow or red, who was responsible for the things that are listed on there that never happened? And there's a chain of events you can track back. And it's not about assigning blame, right? That's the first, here's where we are. And then we come up with a rescue plan, which could be a variety of different flavors. We could take over the PMO office. We can advise the SI working on it. It really depends on how much the client wants to empower us and use us as bulldogs in this situation.
So, and if you want to start, I mean, at the point that you have to rescue and there's 5 million on the line, you're probably a bit on the late side. If you want to start a project like this clean, how would you start, like in the first phase, the setup, the contracting, the engagement, so this doesn't happen? Is that an option?
It absolutely is an option. I think it should be mandatory, right? That's, again, why I wrote the book. It's called Start at Zero, because the focus is on phase 0. Before you even start talking about what product you're going to buy, you need to get your house in order. Even before you go talk to an architect, you need to sit down in when you're laying down in your bed in your old house, you're like, okay, what should a new house look like? What should I be able to do with this? Do I have the resources to build a new house? Who am I going to involve in this project? Who's got the political willpower? And so when it translates to boards or legislatures, right, you need to get buy-in from everybody, not just the funding. Because what happens a lot of times is people find the money, they have some grant, and they're like, I need to spend this by March 30th. Let's see who I can give this to and get it out of my bank. and then forget about it. So the right way of doing it is starting at zero, do phase zero right, understand your processes, outline your outcomes, and then you layer on top of that everything else, the systems, the business processes, the SIs, the contracts, everything gets defined based on your terms. A good example is go live dates, right? We see this all the time. The vendor dictates go live dates. They'll come in on a kickoff meeting and say, okay, you're going to go live on March 30th of next year. And there is no project plan. There is no science. They don't take into consideration what the blackout dates might be. There may be audits. People are taking vacations or maternity leaves. All of that needs to be defined on day one. So we help our clients prep to get to that point, and then they can either do it by themselves with a good foundation, or we can stay with them as long as it takes.
And normally, would you also run an RFP for these SIs or these vendors, or do you just say it's SAP or Microsoft 365 or whatever ERP it is?
No, we run RFP. So we don't recommend product. We're completely independent. But again, because our clients are governments, they will help. We'll help them run the RFP process. So they have their purchasing departments and their laws. And these purchasing departments, again, they're more used to buying concrete or police cars, and software selection and purchasing is not something in their wheelhouse. So that's where we help guide them, give them the templates, the scopes of work, requirements, the processes, the 2Bs, all of that happens in phase zero. And then they use that output to create an RFP.
Before we jump back in, here is something that I've learned from over 30 years of working in technology. The hardest part of leadership, it's not the technology, and it's not even the people or the teams. It's often that you're at it alone by yourself. There's no one in the room that fully gets what you're dealing with. There's no one that you can trust to discuss your decisions with. If that sounds familiar, find me on LinkedIn, Mark Wormgoor, and tell me what's in your mind. There's no pitch, just a discussion with somebody who's sat in that chair as well. Let's get back to it. I know more, and probably most people know more about about private companies than they know about public sector. What's the main difference in that first phase or the contracting phase between the two?
There's no profit incentive. You can't sell to government saying we're going to save you money. They care about money. Don't get me wrong, but there's a different sort of fire, right? When in commercial sector, you say you can increase their EBITDA by a certain percentage by doing these things. That's in your favor. In our clientele, on the government side, profits don't matter. It's taxpayer money, but it's not wasteful. What matters is it going to make them more efficient? Are the people you're dealing with going to be good people that care about their organization as much as you do, and the people eventually that they serve? So it's a very nuanced negotiation phase. Yes, dollars and cents come in to play, but it's not the leading factor, which is why the RFP process, if not done right, if you only do it on cost, you can end up with something really bad for your organization if you haven't thought this through phase one or phase zero.
A lot of these programs have there is no business case, right? I mean that's true for private sector and probably public sector as well. I mean, I've seen M&A cases, but if you just run an ERP upgrade or a re-implementation or just the next version, or you're replacing something old with something new, usually there's not a business case. It's just a lot of money, I'd say, and not wasted, but down the drain without a return. How do they look at that?
So the organizations that do it right will have a business case. I'll give you an example. We're working with the Port of Portland, Oregon, PDX Airport. Next time you come to the US, fly into Portland. It's one of the most beautiful airports in the whole world. And they've done it right. And we've been involved from day one. They did phase zero. And before they brought us on, they spent maybe 2 years researching the market, understanding what they have. And then when we come on board, we start doing phase zero in earnest. And that was done very, very correctly. And I speak about that in the book, to the point where when the RFP was released, the vendors had everything in there: the business case, why they're doing it, what's expected, what sort of demos we want to see, what we don't want. And they got, I think, 17 different bids, high quality. And then we took them through 4 sets of demos, 4 different vendors, and they're about to make a selection. I can't reveal that, who they went with, but a year and a half of phase 0 done right, and the results are obvious. Like that's going to be the foundation of this 3 to 4 year long implementation.
That's probably a small team, and it's not a multi-million phase 0. This phase 0 is a small team. Is that worth the investment? Because a year and a half, 2 years preparation sounds very long.
It's long, but also it's a pretty big organization. So phase 0 was a couple million, right? It's a pretty big port and airport on the Pacific Northwest. And they may have maybe less than 1,000 employees, but the moving parts are so many. They have ports, ships, 3 airports, retail, leasing, large capital projects, and all of that to understand what's going on is critically important. Yeah, you don't have to spend 18 months, but if you have the time and the money and you want to do it absolutely foolproof, recommend it. The other thing too is it becomes a good change management tool, phase 0, right? Because you think of change management as something that happens somewhere in the middle or at the end. But when you start talking to people about a change that's coming 2 years from now, let's dig into your processes, let's dig into your systems. Tell me what hurts, what the pain points are. People start really looking at their workflow and the organization in a different lens. In fact, that organization has called it Port Forward. The project isn't just ERP, it is a transformational project for the whole organization. And that's how massive the impact is going to be for them.
That's very different from just an ERP upgrade. This is the ERP space you play in. We're now moving into the age of AI, and I think you've said that a lot of the mistakes that enterprises, governments make with the ERP implementation, we're just repeating them in AI adoption. How do you see that? How do you see AI?
I mean, it's a generational tool, right? Mark, I tell my people all the time, I haven't been this excited since I discovered HTML in 1999. I was late to it, but you remember the time when you could build things by yourself and it would show up on a screen, and if you know how to do this. And so I've been tinkering a lot with AI, with OpenClaw. We built agentic workforces for ourselves within the company. And it's an exciting time. On the flip side of it, it's also an exciting time for private equity, VCs, and marketing firms, right? So there's this huge gap between what's actually available, what these products can do, and what the marketing says it can do. So it's a marketing race more than it's a tech race. So I went to this GovAI conference last year in San Jose. There were about 400 attendees, maybe half of them were vendors, and all kinds of tall claims. And keep in mind, the audience, the people they're trying to sell to are governments. By design, they're not on the bleeding edge. They're just thinking about moving to the cloud in 2025 and 26. And here you are trying to sell them, buy my AI, it's going to solve all your problems. Problem number one with that, right? And is that an AI deployment, even if it's a chatbot, it's an implementation of its own. If you don't have the data, if you don't have governance, if you don't have the outcomes mapped and what business processes you actually want to use these tools for, a product's not going to do it for you. So when I say the same mistakes are being repeated, it's by going product first. It's not thinking through like a business person, like, okay, what is this going to do for me? Is it safe? Do I even have the goods to be able to make this useful? And that's where the market is. I think it's the same way with commercial, maybe a little more advanced, where people with profit motives can take chances and really design the pilots that work for them. The other thing not working too is the pilots are not designed well. And in studying the AI wave in the market, I think people that have picked a lane trying to solve a specific problem with AI are doing much better than those saying, I can solve any problem for you. Yeah, you can, but I don't trust that. So in a nutshell, that's where I think it's very exciting, but the principles don't change. It's just, at the end of the day, it's software implementation, it's software development. And what are you producing when you say we have an AI product? you either built it using AI like Replit or Cursor, or two, there's one little piece of there where it makes an LLM call and analyzes something. What's an AI product? Unless you're building your own large language models or something that's going to help other people do stuff. So it's a confusing time for people that are not in the know.
And there's quite a few still, I can imagine, especially in the government sector. Then what really interests me, and of course a lot of them are written about this, but the big consulting, McKinsey having, I forget the number, I think it's 30,000 AI employees. I think that was the number they said. Accenture losing 60 billion in market cap because of AI. IBM now losing a lots of market share as well because Claude can do COBOL modernization. This is really going to impact that whole market. How do you see this playing out? Where is it going to go?
Well, and as a consulting firm owner, that worries me, right? Because traditionally, labor hours times a rate is your revenue. Now, if we start producing agentic workforces that do the work for our clients, two things happen. I'm losing revenue on the traditional cost model, and the client has to pay less because they're getting the whole premise of consulting based on hours is getting blown up. And you're seeing that in these layoffs. We've taken a slightly different view of this, right? We're not going to look 2 years ago. If you had asked me, what do I see as a successful end of 2025? We were on track to grow the firm we would have ended last year with 100 people, right? And traditionally, the more people, the more revenue. That therefore the size of your organization. We ended with 50, and we added maybe 10 along the way last year. That's because we figured out a way to automate a lot of the stuff. Now, how did we do this? We've built our own engines and rags that allow us to produce like a government proposal within 9 minutes using our institutional knowledge. It used to take 30 plus hours. And we're now turning that same engine into a delivery engine where the premium is going to be on senior, seasoned people that can deliver the deliverables. Why do people really hire consultants? They don't hire them because we give them fancy 200-page reports. It's because we bring experience. We bring blamability, right? Consultants are the first ones to go when something goes wrong. And it's not an advertised service we offer, but it's an unspoken rule. And if you can keep those elements while the deliverables get made, you're taking away 80% of the time it takes to produce that work. And 20% of it is the face-to-face, the interactions, the meetings, the presentations that the executives on the client side really want. And so we're trying to preserve that while keeping high quality and security in mind. And unfortunately, it's not an easy avenue like it was 22 years ago for me to walk in with no experience into a consulting firm and grow with it. Those opportunities are shrinking, which is a sad thing, but it's business and this is how it's going to be.
And that's the part that worries me, at least, is what's going to happen with the junior people. So in consulting, that this model where juniors grow up into manager, senior manager, managing director, or whatever, and they grow up. What's the future of that model? Do you still hire juniors?
We do, but it's very tactical. It's not in volumes anymore. You need to be exceptional. You need to come to the table with AI forward thinking, AI native thinking, and you should be able to put these Lego bricks together, right? That's the future. If you're a junior and if you're listening to this, learn how to put these tools together that exist, right? Call it an AI product, whatever. But if you can get high quality work done at a lower cost, you're going to be more valuable to the firm. And then what remains is, you and I grew up in consulting. People with stellar Excel skills and document formatting skills were often left behind in favor of people that could talk to other people, sell, build relationships. And those things are the premiums that will remain. So if you can be AI forward, you can put Lego bricks together, make something happen, and be good with people. Those are the consultants that will survive.
And if you then have all those Lego bricks in an organization like yours, how do you ensure quality? Because I mean, AI is good and it's getting better and better, and then it hallucinates and makes something up, and it's crazy. So how do you make sure that what you deliver still meets the mark?
It's human in the loop, not just human in the loop. It's a human final approval. What I'm trying to do is take away the grunt work out of the consulting deliverable process. But it doesn't go out until a senior executive has seen it, signed off on it, and if it's wrong, can be blamed for it. Speaking in plain terms, I would never put an AI product in front of a client because you can't go that way, right? I was on a call this morning with a new client, and I asked him, what was the competition like? Because it was an RFP process. We have to respond to RFPs too. And he said, yeah, there were like 10 other firms and the pricing ranged from $10,000. And this is for an ERP selection. Our pricing was like $500,000. So there's someone offering $9,000 for the same work. And he said that their proposal essentially was, we'll help you use ChatGPT. Okay, maybe not on those words, right? But that's the other end of the spectrum, because you can build a chatbot or a set of forms and say, here, Mark, answer these questions. And at the end of the day, you'll get a report. You can do that on your own. Why would you hire consultants? So I'm convinced that there's the value of true consulting, where people want to sit in a room and talk to another human being that's done this before, has more experience with the problem you're trying to solve, is going to remain. So human in the loop, and final approval is the way to go.
I'd be very worried if ChatGPT was selecting my REOP, honestly.
Oh yeah,
on its own.
Yeah, it'll give you a great reason, but it'll be wrong.
But maybe all the wrong evidence behind it. That's completely made up. A quick one before we continue. If you're getting something out of this conversation, please hit the subscribe button below. That way, other tech leaders can find us as well. I would really appreciate it. Let's get back to it. From here, right, and we're now in 2026. Where do you see the future? Or do you look at the future? 28, 29, 30? What's it going to do to these big ERP programs, right? Because they're not going to stop. We have a lot of new massive programs going on. The consulting, how do you see the future?
I think the future, I think it's now. Two things: data sovereignty, right? If you were moving from an on-premise AS400 based system, even 5 years ago, and a SaaS vendor would show up with a great product and say, I'm just going to take this thing off your hands. It's gone. You don't have to worry about this. The data is going to sit in my data centers, and no one paid attention to what they were doing with the data. And now they have agentic frameworks trained on your data that's being sold back to you. So people are getting wise to this, to the point that, for 20 years, we've been hearing data is the new gold. And we're finally starting to connect the dots on that and see what that actually means. It's not just like that Facebook built a whole empire based on our pictures, but our enterprise data has been used to create these models. So the future is data sovereignty, keeping ownership of your data, making sure that you can use multiple third-party tools, no matter what the system of record is, right? These ERP systems aren't going away. The Workdays, Oracles, SAPs are wonderful products for the enterprise that will remain the system of record. And they have their own agentic frameworks built in. But sometimes you could be locked into that framework, right? When you need to, there might be something cooler down the road that you should be able to use. So data sovereignty. And the second thing is, these are great products, but they're also pretty homogenized. You can run an AP process, you can run an AP process. They'll talk about their unique selling points, but at the end of the day, it's a system of record. The cool stuff is going to happen locally with your data, maybe on premises back, because keeping control of your data sets, having the right governance is going to be critical, because then you can really apply agentic frameworks and do things outside of your system of record that you don't have to be locked into.
And in public sector? because that's the part that interests me. They like you said, 2025, the year of cloud migrations, or everybody else did that maybe in 2015, 2020. And,
Yeah.
and I fully get it, right? I mean, it's public sector. They don't have a profit incentive. Its stability is everything, of course. You don't want to have a Birmingham case on your hand. Where are they going to go?
I think the public sector has had historically the great benefit of leapfrogging bad technologies, right? Because they're slow, because they don't change quite often. They've leapfrogged and not had to deal with stuff like virtual desktops, right? 10 years ago. So they've gone from on-prem green screens to SaaS in many cases. They didn't even have an on-prem, GUI-based ERP system. And now it's slightly different because what I talked about earlier, the marketing race to get your leads into their systems before you even have a product, making it look like it's cheap, it's easy, it's sort of confusing that market. Uh, but the fact remains that if you're not ready, you're not going to be able to make good use of any product being sold to you. So I think governments, now that we're starting to talk about data sovereignty, what it means to go to a SaaS provider, how do you keep control of your data and own it? That if they do that right, I think they can leapfrog this cycle and really get into agentic frameworks, and do more with less. They've been talking about doing more with less forever. They can attract the right talent in most cases because they have older systems. They don't, you know, so all of this is converging for the local government market to be able to take advantage of it. But they need to start seeing it for what it is. This is not any different than buying a new ERP. You can't jump at it just because someone is giving it to you for $10 and says you don't need an IT lift. I heard that at this conference. No IT needs to be involved. Just here, take this. And then they figure out that, you're now going to charge me to clean my data. You're now going to charge me to host it somewhere because my systems and my infrastructure doesn't match the cool new thing that you produced. And so it's coming around, right? They're slow, but they're deliberate. And I see it as um, my job. One of my jobs, the core responsibilities, is to educate the market on all these things, and which is again why I have a blog and a video series, and the book talks about all this. So,
And you're coming on the podcast as well. If I'm then starting tomorrow with either my next ERP replacement or going for this AI replacement, let's call it a replacement, what are like the three absolute big lessons that I need to be aware of or keep in mind?
you need to. The first one is start global, right? What's the strategy? What are you trying to do? And what is the strategy? Like we're building AI strategies for our clients. What used to be, we still do it, information technology strategies. A big component of that is now AI strategy. We've built our own AI maturity model for governments that walks you through the 5 different levels and give you a reality check. Like this, you're at level 0. You can't even use a chatbot because here's the different factors that you need to do. And how do you go up the value chain on that? So keeping the big strategy in mind is critically important. 2, don't look at AI as a silver bullet. It's still an implementation. It might take as much work as an ERP implementation because the work involved is still the same. You have to review processes, data, do change management, and make sure that you have the right security and guardrails around this thing. And third thing is people are people. You have to take the people management seriously. People are worried about what AI is going to do to their jobs, and you're seeing it in the commercial sector. People's jobs are being replaced. So where do you fit into the new world? And like I said, if you have the ability to use the tools that are available to make things better for yourself first and then the organization, and you can communicate with humans, those are the premium skills going forward.
You're writing the book, Start at Zero. When can we expect it? I know it's not out yet. When can we actually expect it?
I said spring 2026, so I have technically 2 more months, but I'm hoping that it's out in the next month. It's in final edits, it's in final design. We're going to work on the ebook and I think the audio version of this, and then you'll see some heavy marketing around that when it's about to be launched. But it's out there. If you want to take a look at chapter 1, it's at startatzero.com. aviraadvisors.com. And then you can get some more goodies when it comes out.
Make sure to put that in the show notes as well so people can go there. Where else can we find you?
LinkedIn. It's like I live on LinkedIn, so just look up my name on LinkedIn. Also, our website, aviraadvisors.com, is a pretty good source. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about these things, and Mark, I'd love to have you on our channel, so we should coordinate that. I want to hear your story and your thoughts. But yeah, those are some cool, quick avenues to reach me.
We'll absolutely make that happen. Thank you very much for coming on today, Avi.
Thanks, Mark. This was fun.
Thank you. As we wrap up another episode of the CTO Compass, thank you for taking the time to invest in you. The speed at which tech and AI develop is increasing, demanding a new era of leaders in tech. Leaders that can juggle team and culture, code and infra, cyber and compliance, all whilst working closely with board members and stakeholders. We're here to help you learn from others, set your own goals and navigate your own journey. And until next time, keep learning, keep pushing, and never stop growing.